Hi, and welcome to another episode of Malachi's Message Toxic Mold Sucks podcast. I'm Elizabeth Kripe, co founder and executive director. Joining me today as our guest co host is Olivia Farbaugh, a Nashville singer songwriter who's partnered with Malachi's Message in creating the CIRS Support Fund. Today we have the first of 3 interviews with Dr. Eric Dorninger. Dr. Dorninger is a registered naturopathic doctor and licensed acupuncturist. He graduated from Bastyr University, the leading accredited university for science-based natural medicine. Prior to medical school, he received his BA in Kinesiology, and he also finished his E.M.T training. Following undergrad, Dr. Dorninger served as an E.M.T. and then completed his doctorate in naturopathic medicine and his master's degree in acupuncture medicine, after which he returned to Boulder, Colorado to complete a 2-year residency in naturopathic primary care. In 2005, Dr. Dorninger founded Roots and Branches Integrative Healthcare, a clinic dedicated to mystery illness where he focuses on the underlying causes of unrelenting chronic illness. He's not concerned with what you have as much as he is with why you have it. He has dedicated his professional life to a deeper understanding of differential diagnosis based in the tradition of remove obstacles to cure. So, Eric, we talked to a lot of people, and when they see CIRS or hear CIRS, right, they have no clue what we're talking about. They wonder if we have a lisp. They wonder if there's a lot of air blowing through the room. And it's not always easy to communicate to people that have no clue. We're in this world. We deal with it on a daily basis. You deal with it hands-on on a daily basis. So if we could take a minute to kind of simplify it so that everybody can understand what this concept is, how it impacts your body, why it's so important, because that's the other thing, a lot of people, right? It's not covered by insurance. It's not covered by mainstream medicine, so it can't be that important. Yeah. So if we could start with what it is and how it impacts us, that would be huge. And you are the person to do it. You are like the CIRS guru we're learning. And your brain is incredible. Every time we get off the phone, Olivia and I go, his brain is working at a different level. So we are super excited to have you be the one explaining this.
Well, your brain works at a different level when you get through the Shoemaker protocol. And the hardest part of that is removing patient from exposure. And we all know that. But CIRS is a secret society where the 11352B can do this very easily. And I am an 11352B. So I say, hello, welcome to the secret CIRS society. And in all sincerity, it is so strange how incredibly studied, published, put together, peer-reviewed, and reproducible this illness is off the hard work of predominantly Dr. Richie Shoemaker, and just how unknown it is in the healthcare system, in public, in chronic ill and mystery illness communities. And it stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. It is a disease of immunoreactivity. It is not a disease of toxicity, and that's why it's called chronic inflammatory responses syndrome, because it's about your own immune system injuring you, and we'll go deep into that. But that's why it's CIRS. It has gone through iterations of what it is not. It'll be called mold illness. It'll be called mold toxicity. And all those are fine to communicate with your bro, you know, when you're chilling at the line in the grocery store. But at the end of the day, that doesn't explain it, because CIRS is any peer-reviewed, published biotoxin, bio meaning nature, like ology of biobiology is a study of nature, bio nature toxins. So we're not talking about evil companies dumping chemicals into clean rivers. We're talking about nature toxins. And there are 5 peer-reviewed published biotoxins or nature toxins. And the first one discovered and really understood was Bastyr out of the Chesapeake Bay. And Dr. Shoemaker was a mom and pop doc who took a loan repayment job in Podunk, Pocomoke, Maryland. And he according to him, because he's a dear friend and mentor of mine, he liked PBRs and fishing and helping people. So he wanted to go to this low-key town where they didn't have good primary care, be a doc, and on the weekends, just, you know, remodel a house and take out the boat with his friends and fish on the Chesapeake Bay. And he was doing extraordinary primary care. If you ever were a patient of Dr. Shoemaker's, it's just a primary care patient, you would say, that's what I want every doctor in the whole world to be as my primary care. because of his diagnosing skills. He's such an exquisite diagnostician. And what we mean by diagnostician is not what you have, but why you have it. That's what your healthcare provider should do, right? And we joked about this on a couple other calls. Hey, my muscles hurt. Hey, I figured you out. You have fibromyalgia, bro. And you're like, cool, there's this thing called the internet. And I looked that up, and algia means pain, and myofibrils mean muscle fibers. So I just told you my muscles hurt. And you just told me in Greek, your muscles hurt. And you're like, why am I here? I just told you what I have, and you just told me what I have. This is getting weird, right? You should go for medical help. You should go to a funk med provider, a specialist, a primary care to find out why muscle pain. And no one was doing that better as a primary care doc and Dr. Shoemaker, who's going, okay, headache, it could be this, it could be those, it could be these, it could be them, it could be these. And then he would use validated labs and imaging to say it is or it isn't what I'm thinking. And then you get an accurate understanding of why. And that why for a mystery illness patient at Roots and Branches can read 3 to 5 pages long. It can say X goes to Y, which goes into Z, which finally manifests as a symptom, your headache, right? And the patient knows how much they have crappy headaches all the time and how much that undermines a date night or a family vacation or getting through work or going to Timmy's basketball game, but you can't lose your job. So you had to spend every ounce of energy left on your work and then take a nap and blah. We want to know why. And Dr. Shoemaker was sitting there doing regular primary care and a handful of cases, and then predominantly young, robust fishermen. This is Pocomoke, Maryland. They were like, you know, the high school football player and the robust baseball player, and they didn't make it into the major leagues. So they become a fisherman in the local scene. And they were having headaches and fatigue and weakness and tingling and numbness and skin rashes and diarrhea. And cholestyramine well call is an incredible medicine to arrest diarrhea. So if you ever have traveler's diarrhea, you want to ask your doctor to consider well call or cholestyramine, because it'll pick up the endotoxin from things like Clostridium difficile or E. coli and arrest the raging leaky gut and the massive diarrhea. And these guys came back and said, thanks for the tip on well call cholestyramine for my raging diarrhea, but I have to tell you something. Not only did my diarrhea stop, my skin rash is clearing. I'm remembering my girlfriend's name. My brain fog is clearing. I can lift fishing nets again. I feel strong and my energy's coming back. And big light bulb. And he said, what the heck just happened? What is cholestyramine really in an organic chemistry perspective? And what is happening in the Chesapeake Bay? And very, very long, drawn out story short, there were massive rains along the shores of Maryland, and Maryland is loaded with big ag chicken farms and tomato farming. So if you grew up on the East Coast, you know, Jersey's the Garden State, and you go down into Maryland, there's a lot more farming than it gets credit for. And they were putting copper in the chicken feed as a fungus. So copper is a fungicide. The other thing copper does is it makes bigger breast on a chicken so that you can get another half pound, a pound of meat at market. So copper is a growth hormone in chicken breast, and it's also fungicide. So in big ag, they were putting copper into the feed, keeping the animal feed lower microbial, feeding it to chickens, and then the chickens were pooping out high nitrogen, just like you would use chicken poop to fertilize a yard or a garden, and high copper. The rains came and that copper nitrogen entered the Chesapeake Bay. The tomato farms, you also need lots of heat. So they'll put down that black plastic to reflect heat. We're also using nitrogen fertilizer. So the nitrogen fertilizer from tomatoes, the nitrogen and copper from the chicken poop entered the Chesapeake Bay. And this bug Pfiesteria at the bottom of the bay that was causing no problems used those basically as steroids, like Arnold at Venice Beach, and could now motile. And they would get the fish sick, and then the fishermen and the women of Pocomoke would get contaminated with Pfiesteria. And Pfiesteria is a seafood toxin, and that was the first biotoxin that Dr. Shoemaker tried to sound the alarms to say, we got a problem here. There's a public health crisis, and he got whitewashed by Everybody from the governor of Maryland to people in the EPA, and you can see old pictures of Dr. Shoemaker literally standing with members of the EPA and the governor of Maryland and so on and so forth. So CIRS is when you get sick from exposure to nature toxins, and that was the biggest one, and that was where he saw people not being able to see blurred lines well. And we all know that's that objective test, the visual contrast sensitivity. And the VCS was the first objective tool he found to differentiate, to separate a case from a healthy control. And that's what we mean by validated labs. You want labs that clinically say, you healthy people can get separated over there. The sick patient that I think is getting caused by this can be over here, right? A mammogram should have a breast cancer showing up in this woman with breast cancer, and it should have clean breast tissue in this woman with no breast cancer, right? And that's the problem with a lot of the labs we've talked about, like urinary mycotoxins, that don't separate healthy people from sick people, meaning healthy people have high urinary mycotoxins, sick patients have high urinary mycotoxins. It's not a diagnostic for CIRS. So the visual contrast was the first thing that he goes, wow, these people have a dramatically different ability to see blurred lines relative to the healthy people. And it's because the chronic inflammatory responses were flaring their optic nerve and making them unable to read the blurred lines. So the first one was seafood toxin. Then he learned about cyanobacteria or algae blooms. That's who we have as our keynote, Elijah Stommel, medical doctor, PhD from Dartmouth, showing higher rates of ALS, Lou freaking Gehrig's disease, in people living around cyanobacteria, algae bloom watersheds. We're connecting Dr. Stommel's work with Dr. Shoemaker's work. Then Lyme tick toxin. So in 1998, Dunte et al. Published that it's not just the Lyme tick, but the toxin it injects that in a small percentage of people with the wrong immune response genes go into cytokine storms. So two people take the same doxycycline, one is back at work, their Lyme is cleared, they killed the bug and they're fine. The other, they killed the Lyme too. They didn't remove the tick toxin, and the tick toxin that Dunte et al. Published and patented. They patented a biotoxin, wild world in biotech that we live, and they're having cytokine storms. Then recluse spider venom. So if you get bit by a recluse and you get that necrotizing spider lesion, you can also get neuroinflammatory responses, brain fog, fatigue, crash your libido, exercise intolerance, rashes from a spider bite with the wrong immune system. And then finally, the big dog, the holy grail, water damage building molds, which then have also become water damage building bacteria known as actinomycetes, and sewer gas endotoxin, the three things that can really trigger CIRS in a building. So CIRS is not exposure to those, it's exposure to those not being able to clear them, which turns on an alternate pathway in your body called the innate immune system, and you cytokine storm. And it's your own immune system burning down you. Yeah. And that's why we call it CIRS and not mold toxicity. It's not mold allergy and so on and so forth.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I've run into quite a few people that when we start a conversation, they say, well, I've been exposed to some of those things and I don't have CIRS. I don't have any of the symptoms. I don't have any of the cluster of symptoms. And it's really hard to go past that point, because then they kind of put up that wall really quickly. And the way you just described that is perfect, that it's not the exposure, it's your body not processing.
God bless you for bringing up that point, because we're going to mediate a lot of marriages right here, right now. You got a husband and a wife in the same building, right? And he's got a lot of pride in this house because it's an old hunting cabin that his grandpappy's pappy built, right? And his brain is working, his penis is working, he can chop wood and recover and have good, strong muscles. And he goes, there's nothing wrong with the building. What's wrong with her? We used to go on date night and ride bike, and we had to cancel our Fiji trip 3 times. What's going on? And you say, sir, if you want any of those things to come back into your life, date nights, vacations, having a brain, not watching your wife in memory care, you're going to listen to what we have to say. She has immune response genetics on chromosome 6 from either her mom, her dad, or both. But on chromosome, and I'm not anti-MTHFR, that's just such downstream chemistry. Yes, treat homocysteines, but 99% of the mystery illness we see is based in inflammation. All of your inflammatory genetics is on chromosome 6 from mom and dad. So whether you have a higher likelihood for celiac or type 1 diabetes or Hashimoto's or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or rheumatoid arthritis or CIRS, those genes are all on chromosome 6. And what Dr. Shoemaker elucidated is that approximately 1 in 4 Americans, 24%, are Lady Gaga born that way with biotoxin illness genes. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't, I mean, we can talk about CRISPR and weird things coming down genetic engineering, but you can't like trade those back in. And you were born with those genes and you were fine. And let's say you grew up in a clean building and then you date this guy and you're going to his grandpappy pappy's moldy cabin, right? You'll still be fine. You can handle some, Wim Hof breathing of that moldy building, right? Then one day you get a cold or a flu, and that's called a priming event in Dr. Shoemaker's work. And that is, and you don't die of influenza, you don't die of H1, you don't die of COVID, but now you've turned on chronic inflammatory responses. You turn on your cytokines storms from the innate immune responses to that building. And the cold goes away, but the CIRS stays until you get diagnosed and treated with the Shoemaker protocol, which includes dealing with Grandpappy's cabin, which brings a lot of tension because I didn't want to spend money on a crawl space in the cabin. I wanted to buy a boat this year, and all these other things. So there's people who have millions of dollars, don't know how to listen and fix their building right. Then there's the middle class who can prioritize money for fixing buildings, but it's a hard swallow because it's a new illness. They're like, what the heck is going on? All right, I tell people all the time when they come to Roots and Branches, we'll get you answers. We will grind to find the relentless underlying causes of your illness, but you might not like those answers because underlying cause medicine is a pain in the ass. And anyone who thinks otherwise doesn't have common sense to go, why did I see 17 doctors and go nowhere? Because the real thing that's happening to you, whether it's sleep apnea or tooth abscess, or you got to change up your diet, or it's CIRS or whatever the flavor day is, they're all pain in the butt to deal with. But when you deal with them, you get to reclaim health. And I would argue wealth and happiness, meaning your brain can work again so you can fight for the promotion, have entrepreneurial ideas, and stay up a little later to get your tax papers in on time versus like turning into a Netflix blob and just, watching your life go away. So that's the difference. He doesn't have the genes. So he's like that guy in Apocalypse Now. I love the smell of mold in the morning, right? And God bless you. We need as few chronically ill people as possible. We need you to hold a job, take kids to basketball practice, be able to take care of aging parents, all that stuff. We're not looking for more sick people. I would love to graduate the chronically ill and call it a lifetime. The problem is 24% of 400 million Americans, that's 100 million people, are born with the disease. And once that disease wakes up, these people are in the rheumatologist, they're in the neurologist, they're in the psychiatrist, they're in the psychologist, they're in the infertility doc, they're in the chiro, they're in the acupuncturist, they're in the ND, they're in the PCP. They are in every specialist with their biotoxin symptoms.
It is when you say Grandpappy's cabin 5 times fast. Great Grandpappy's cabin.
We're not even talking about Grandpappy's cabin's outhouse and the level of endotoxin we're going to find in that steamy puppy, right? So is that a outhouse or like a giant kitty litter box that hasn't been cleaned in 10 years? People don't understand. They also can't forget sewer gas, and that's where with Olivia, we talked offline just about her beautiful tiny home and just making sure anyone who builds a tiny home, make sure you're managing your endotoxin, right? So.
And that's something that I'm learning so much about all this. So thank you for sharing everything. And that was something that I didn't know about until quite recently about the sewer gas. That there's so many different things. And I think it's really cool too, that you're kind of breaking everything down because like you said, I mean, whenever you figure out what's going on with you, it's like, okay, yeah, you might not really like that this is what it is, but at least now there's a starting point and at least now there's a treatment. We're so blessed with having people like you who are talking about things in layman's terms and educating, because I feel like even just a couple of years ago there wasn't all of this out there for us to learn about. So for anyone who is like just finding out that this is what's going on, or this might be what's going on, I think that's a really good focus too. That's like, hey, now we know what it is, so now you can treat it, and there's a lot of education out there. So I think that
Well,
was
and the godfather, Dr. Shoemaker, who discovered the biotoxin pathway, who discovered CIRS and refined it and validated it and had a lot of ideas that he thought were going to be true, but because he's an honest scientist, they didn't pan out. So what you have in the refined diagnosis and treatment is validated, reproducible, peer-reviewed, published data. And I'm going to tell you, when I signed on for my Shoemaker certification in late 2013, I called Deb Wade, or 2014, I was up and running. I started my 10-year journey with getting yelled at by Dr. Shoemaker, who's a dear friend and mentor, but like, I reveled in that drill sergeant approach to, how do you know it's not Wigler's granuloma? Did you look at anti-nuclear cytoplasmic antibodies? This is a very similar presentation, and the least mold happy person on the entire planet is Dr. Richie Shoemaker. I would like to slight myself as the number 2 or number 5 or top 10 least mold happy people, because there is a strict diagnostic criteria for I should or not, or I should not move forward with labs and imaging. And that's doing a VCS, which 5% of healthy controls fail that thing. 5% of healthy people fail it. 50 to 92% of biotoxin ill fail it, depending on the different data sets of which clinic was repeating that. You have 6 out of the 13 clustered symptoms or more in under 11 years old. You ask 37 symptoms arranged into 13 groups. And if you say yes to one question in that group, so if you say yes to 1 of 5 or 1 of, or 2 of 5, that's a positive cluster. 6 out of 13 or more in under 11, or 8 out of 13 in 11 and older. And you have a history of biotoxin, which I could find on anybody, because who didn't go to, live in a moldy frat house, or go to a kindergarten with a dilapidated roof, or, go to a youth group in some moldy basement somewhere at some point in their life, right? And then that's not a positive, that's a positive screening. And then you move forward with the labs. And that's, there's more than just these as the CIRS diagnosis evolved. But if you have 4 out of 10 of failed VCS, the genetics, elevated matrix metalloproteinase 9, transforming growth factor beta 1, complement 4A from National Jewish run without Futhon, if you have ACTH cortisol mismatch, right? These people say they have adrenal fatigue. No, they have hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysregulation. Adrenal fatigue is the Hashimoto's of the adrenal, Addison's disease, autoimmune attacking your adrenals. It's rare to find that. That exists too, but it's hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. ADH osmolality, where your brain doesn't release the hormone to hold on to hydration. Low VEGF and gliadin antibodies. If you have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10 of those, that is confirmation of CIRS. And that's why you can't in inflammatory medicine of any sort, it's rare to pull one marker and diagnose something, right? Even if I have TPO antibodies in Hashimoto's, I need to show destruction to thyroid with multinodular thyroiditis to say Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? Just having that antibody isn't enough. So we love and celebrate Dr. Shoemaker, and I'm ride or die. I will battle next to that dude against a gazillion moldy orcs because he did such honest, clean medicine that finally helped me and my family heal, and also helped me understand patients that weren't getting better in my office. And it was frustrating the heck out of me. It was driving me crazy. I was having trouble sleeping because I would say, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? What's the underlying cause? What's the underlying cause? What's the underlying cause? And I ruled out so many things they were not, but I didn't understand how to screen and diagnose and validate CIRS. So the other thing, when I was on Judy's podcast, in the comments, what a lot of people commented on is I said, you're not lazy or crazy. So the other wonderful thing about this, because Olivia, you were just talking about the pain in the keister part of this illness, right? So the funnest part is the validation moment, where we really show people this confirmed diagnosis. And we're like, it's not in your head. And your first grade teacher was wrong about you, right? And you didn't quit gym class and blame it on your period 50 times because you don't want to, like do push-ups. You actually can be a CrossFitter and hang out with your girlfriends and crush some weights. Oh yeah, it might be time to forgive your mom and your dad who were totally cuckoo and were weird to you and traumatizing, because that's where you got the genes from. And you were all living in a really concerning building, flared to the dickens, agitated and yelling at each other with no generosity, decency, kindness, compassion, or listening skills, right? Welcome to your childhood, right? And that's where we have 3 swords of forgiveness at Roots and Branches on the spiritual side of healing after we do all the deep dive biochemistry. And that is forgiveness, gratitude, and humor, right? You need to lighten up, because this disease is like a dementor entity that will suck your soul. It will suck your joy. It will suck your ability to laugh. One of the funnest things I'm going to tear up, but one of my favorite things that I get to hear is when a tweener or teener starts laughing again, and a parent told me they haven't heard their child laugh in 3 or 4 years. That is friggin' awesome to come to work to and get that update, right? So it's like, you need to just lighten up while you're going through it. You need to be grateful that we have Dr. Shoemaker, who worked 100-hour work weeks for 25 years on Unravel This, and all the team of bandits that want to join him, like Malachi's Message and Roots and Branches and CIRS Lab, who I talked to last night, and fricking Judy Cho and her ability to bring awareness to this illness. And then, of course, the community of CIRS-X and surviving mold that we're going to celebrate at the conference. There are people who are going to do this right, but it may have taken you 50 years for someone to diagnose CIRS. And I think I told you guys in the phone call, I diagnosed an 80-year-old who's been fatigued since 12 last year with CIRS. And she had CIRS before Dr. Shoemaker discovered CIRS, right? Her CIRS predates the medical discovery. And to think of how many times she was told weird things about her performance or who she is as a person, or why she had to pay delay her taxes again and pay a late fee on her Verizon bill. And it's all because she just sucks as a human being. She's just worthless and doesn't know what she's doing with life. No, she's neuroinflamed. She doesn't make neurotransmitters like dopamine for ambition and drive, feelings of self-worth, the ability to finish tasks, decisiveness, courage, part of our libidos. All that goes away for her, right? And these poor patients start self-identifying as incapable, start self-identifying as everything my weird dad told me is true, and they don't even realize your poor dad, and that's why it's the forgiveness is so important. What we have less forgiveness for is doctors that we invite to do peer-reviewed, reproducible screening and diagnosis and treatment, inspectors, mitigators who we invite and we teach them, hey, that's cool that you did that IIRC class, and that's good baseline knowledge. This is how you treat a CIRS building. And we think at some point in time, all buildings should be treated and built and cleaned to CIRS level, because air quality is important for everybody. But everyone's invited to the party. Once you know, and you go back to sloppy corner cutting, sweep it under the carpet. I don't want to overhaul, how I have to collect data in my clinic and hire another receptionist. And if you're not ready to do that, we're gonna call you out, because the chronically ill are depending on you to protect their time, their money, and their energy. And most of them are burnt out. They're running out of funds, or they're already depleted. And that's the other reason I wanted to connect with Malachi's Messages, because we bump into millionaires and billionaires sometimes, and we want to make sure they know what you're doing so we get real endowment. For those of you who don't know, Malachi's Message has this many applications and this many funds right now. And we have a starving artist, musician. I don't know if you ever heard Olivia's music, but it is dope. I mean, it is, when I need to get pumped up, I'm throwing on, I just YouTube your videos. because I don't have the commercial interruptions. And she's like, instead of like focusing on another gig, I'm going to do CIRS Fest and try and raise money, right? But we're talking about her raising thousands of dollars, and Malachi's message needs millions of dollars, right? And because the need is so high, right? But the reason I feel so secure about our mission is because we have a clean screening and we have a clean diagnosis that says you is or you isn't CIRS.
Mm-hmm.
Can we real quick, just to kill the elephant in the room, for I know like a bazillion people are gonna hear this, watch it, and associate Shoemaker, and you talked about water damaged buildings and how many comments have come out saying that he went against what he said about mold and how mold really isn't an issue.
Thank you.
Bash that. Can we've talked about it off air, but it needs to be public.
Dr. Shoemaker is my dear friend and mentor. I love that man. I would lay down my life for him. He's an academic, and he's a highbrow academic. He's the smartest guy in the room. So when he makes a highbrow, highfalutin medical discovery, he gets excited about it. And what happened, I think it was on a A4M webinar, he basically said, forget everything you learned about mold. And he was breaching the subjects of there's more to a contaminated building. There's water damage building bacteria known as actinomycetes. There's water there's sewer gases known as endotoxin. And I wish we could hit the rewind button, because everyone has taken that out of context. Every single thing you ever learned about water damage building molds driving CIRS is true, will forever remain true, and is buttoned up science. When we order brain MRI with neuroquant and we're looking for atrophy, there's a different pattern of atrophy for a moldy brain. There's a different pattern, and in mold, actually, your frontal cortex and your cortical gray swells like a hangover on a brain MRI with neuroquant, and your caudate, this little tail that does articulation, assimilation, word finding ability, shrinks. And when that anatomy shrinks, you're like, blah, 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 right? For actinos, you get massive multinuclear atrophy. And then for poop, you get, for being around sewer gas, your cortical gray matter shrinks. So if you cut a Twinkie in half, that yellow cake part of the Twinkie of your brain just totally dissolves. And 90% of atrophy on brain MRI and neuroquant due to CIRS is from actinomycetes and sewer gas. 10% is from mold, right? Wow. And so what he was trying to say is that a sewer gas demon is even more intense on atrophy rates, right? So he was just trying to really give actinomycetes and endotoxin their due, and that's why for Olivia, we were talking with her about, hey, you got that beautiful, gorgeous, tiny home, you got these beautiful guitars and you're just playing on your porch. Don't forget about the crapper, right? You got to maintain that crapper, because there can be not 1 ounce of water penetrating that home, not 1 ounce of mold, but you vented your exhaust from your toilet wrong, or your septic has a leak in it, or instead of having a tight cover with rubber on your access for your septic, you just have a piece of flagstone. And I walk up to your home and I smell just a little bit of doo-doo. It's a very faint, trained nose smell. And what Dr. Shoemaker is trying to say is that'll atrophy your brain even more, right? And so it was taken so out of context. And this is what we try and do with Dr. Shoemaker. He lives in the misty mountaintops of hardcore biochemical and medical discovery, right? And myself, Dr. Scott McMahon's an incredible teacher, Lysander Jim, who's going to be at the conference. There's just these people in our group who know how to take that misty mountaintop knowledge and bring it to the masses, right? Bring it to primary care, bring it to the public, bring it to the patient who's doctor hopping to go, hey, should I get evaluated CIRS? I don't know what that is. I have patients who have handed their doctor Shoemaker peer-reviewed medical papers or surviving mold or mold warriors, et cetera, and they just don't look into it, right? So what CIRS X is about, the July 13th through 16th Boulder, Colorado conference, which Malachi's message is going to be at. Olivia is going to be ripping some guitar and entertaining us while learning cool facts. I have a hunch that music and academia go well together. But what it's going to be about is catching people up and then taking the people who are established Shoemaker practitioners and established mitigators or mediators, polishing their game. But when people leave CIRS X, they should know how to screen or decide if they want to screen, diagnose, and treat. And that's not just the patient, that's also the building. And we don't care if you don't want to do this illness. You just have to know how to screen for it. So if you're a neurology nurse, or you're an acupuncturist, or you're a primary care doc, you need to know how to do a visual contrast. You need how to ask 37 symptoms arranged into 13 clusters or clustered symptoms. And you need how to ask, did you have grouper on your mission trip in Africa? Was there visible microbial growth in your Thailand Airbnb on your surf trip? Right? That's all we need the majority of healthcare to do.
It's really interesting. I had an act. Sorry, I'm not yawning because you're boring. I'm just really tired today. I just want to make that clear. But I had an applicant that I reviewed last night, actually, and that was one of the things they said, though. They said that they had seen a physician who had been taught how to screen for CIRS, but that they didn't know how to read what they screened. So they said they were taught how to screen for it, so they did these tests, but now they don't know how to read it and they don't feel comfortable reading it, so I've got to find a different doctor.
Yeah.
Which was hard to read, because I'm like, this person probably felt like they were going into it like, oh, I'm going to actually get an answer either way here, or receive the diagnoses, or figure out what path I'm on. And is that a fairly common thing from what you see?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. There's that one, which breaks my heart more, because that's probably a doctor who, we could spend 10 minutes with and they would be dialed on how to screen. Right. And then we would plug them into the surviving mold listserv on Shoemaker certified doctors. And that's one thing. The other thing we're seeing is mold is hot and the money grabs are happening. Yeah. Right. So and that's why Dr. McMahon and I co-founded CIRS X. CIRSX.com is basically the institute that throws an annual conference for all things healing biotoxin illness, but is also a certification for training mitigators or mediators, and everything we do is peer reviewed. So no one is allowed to own anything, right? I'm not going to do like the Dr. D miracle fog, right? Or the Dr. D biota spray, right? It is basically, we write a certification. We're going to find the 5 best in the industry to peer review how to mitigate a home. Everyone challenges everybody, right? Those people get a stipend for their contribution, for their time, because these are people who are taking hundreds of hours away from their private practices and family life to write these things. But no one gets to, a lot of the industry out there, someone will create a product and then build an education around it, right? And that's weird. That's what pharma does. Right. Pharma has 48 failed studies on statins. They have 2 that are mediocre. And then they're going to build coursework around why you should use a statin to lower your LDL. And it's such a meek prevention in heart attack and stroke. And we know 65-year-olds with mild cognitive impairment, when you give them lipophilic statins like Lipitor, the #1 prescribed drug in the United States of America, you are increasing conversion to dementia. Right. All that was based around, I have a product I want to sell, and I'm going to make a fake or weak education around it, rather than let's take the best minds in the business and say, what's the best way to screen? What's the best way to diagnose? What's the best way to treat? And what's the best way to graduate the patient? And also the building, because the building is a living, breathing ecology all its own. So CIRS X's motto is awareness. And that's like, man, Judy Cho, thank you for bringing up the awareness on this, right? Then screening. Everyone, including that doctor, needs to know how to do a quick screen and know, should we spend money on the diagnostic labs, right? And once in a blue moon, I'll do it anyway, even if the screening's low, because, a migraine of 9 years, but everything else is fine, and the body still could be CIRS. But if the screening hits, you must refer out for diagnostic labs or hold those in. We're trying to take that doctor who could be a great screener, but probably doesn't want to deal with the pain in the keister of CIRS and know where they're referring to. Then it's diagnosis, then it's treatment, then it's graduation, right? People graduate. This is a vicious treatable illness, right? And then there's maintenance. because we graduate you until your next major exposure. And that's where the other day I grammed on just me. I was teaching for Apex Nutraceuticals, fundamentals of functional blood chemistry. And I just showed people how I travel. Right. I make Apex find a new build hotel. You don't need to pay me to go on the road to a moldy place so I can come home and be depressed and angry and agitated for my family for 2 weeks and Dumbo for my patients. Right. So I show people how I set up my Aeroasis iodabs, how I take my well-called cholestyramine about 3 days before traveling, the entire weekend during, and then for a couple of days when I get home, just because I'm going to go through Denver International Airport and I'm going to be through some places. Right. But people graduate. And then you need to maintain. So if you fix your building and then you never clean your gutters, you're asking for an ice dam backup in Colorado that's going to create another water penetration, right? So it's really about taking that doctor has potential to very quickly ramp on and be a screener, right? And that's why, I told you guys, when I threw a kegger back in high school, everyone was invited. Right, the football quarterback captain was making out with the flute player in the band, and everyone's there just rocking out, and that's what we want the CIRS party to be. Everyone's invited, but if you start doing weird, unsubstantiated stuff that wastes the chronically ill patient's time, money, and energy, we will privately talk to you about it. Okay, say, look, like you really need to be. The dues you pay to be part of this club is you challenge everything politely. And that's a problem with science right now, is if I challenge you and ask you for your data, I'm seen as toxic, right? How about being seen as someone who's protecting the little guy who's chronically ill, running out of money, about to get divorced, and can't find their freaking keys, right? How about that? Right? What happened to that understanding of why we're quote unquote being aggressive? And again, it's like, dude, urinary mycotoxins are the same in healthy people as in sick patients, right? I can eat a moldy blueberry and piss hot on a urinary mycotoxin. This is not a disease of toxicity. There is nothing to kill. I am going to pull blood cultures on you, right? A good blood culture is you pull from the right vein, you pull from the left vein, just in case there's any contamination from your skin. You grow those out and you look for something. The amount of time I've caught something on a blood culture in 20 years of clinical practice is zero. I'd love to, because you could be the hero of the day. You can admit them into the ER, the ICU, get them IV antibiotics, or the one time you would use IV antifungals is if you actually were a post-chemotherapy patient who had 2 white blood cells left and mold actually grew in your veins. This is so rare. So there's nothing to kill, right? There's inert biotoxins, 500 dolphins or smaller, that we need to remove to the toilet with cholestyramine well-call. We need to get you out of those exposures. And it's not mold allergy. That you go, if you're making antibodies to mold and you're having allergy to it, that's for the allergists. You go get allergy shots or allergy drops, right? You don't have mold in your brain. You have inflammatory cytokines changing your brain, but it's your own immune system. And for people who don't understand it, I say, look, you got 2 people who got COVID. One sneezed twice, said, you're all idiots for shutting down the economy and wearing masks. The other one got COVID and they're on their deathbed going, take the virus seriously. It's the exact same virus, 2 radically different experiences. One person's could antibody tag that relatively easily, and Central Intelligence Agency says bad guy is right here. The Navy SEAL cleanly takes the shot without collateral damage, right? The other person's immune system, their HLA, their chromosome 6 genetic immune responses to COVID, and next year it'll be a different virus, isn't good at seeing it, just like the biotoxin ill aren't good at seeing the biotoxin. So they can't antibody tag it. And then I go Arnold and the Predator, right? My night vision goggles aren't working. I didn't get the GPS coordinates for the biotoxin. Get me the M60, lay and pray and spray. And that's what your immune system does. It goes, I can't see it. I can't tag and assassinate it. Turn on the innate cytokine storms. Let's go army on this bleep, right? And what do we do sometimes? Our army, we just lay down fire and we go, cool, we blew up the enemy. And we blew up a school. Shit, right? And that's your innate immune system. It's nonsensical, overzealous, self-made immune confused, immune disorganized cytokine storms that drive the 37 symptoms of CIRS.
How do you follow that with all of the Arnold in there? I feel like that's really hard to follow.
I
For
am in the
coming
process
with
of writing Mystery Chronic Illness as taught by Arnold, and I will be putting, Total Recall for the apnea. I need oxygen now. I mean, you can't go wrong with Arnold. Didn't know he's an honorary Austrian naturopath. So we have to make sure he knows how much biochemistry he's teaching in his movies. So, but you have to bring it down to that, because now again, I'm not anti-sauna, right? But you don't have a sauna deficiency, right? And then a lot of times people will put a wood sauna onto a basement slab. There's no barrier there, and then the sauna is moldy, right? Saunas increase heat shock proteins, which are anti-inflammatory. So that's step 3 in naturopathic medicine: stimulate the vital force. And there's nothing wrong with a sauna. It does not replace step 1, identify and treat underlying causes, which has to be remove yourself from the biotoxin exposure. Then you still have biotoxin in you. That's what Dr. Shoemaker proved in the sequential activation of innate immune element study, where those patients still had high cytokines when they were put in documented clean buildings. Then he gave them a well-called cholestyramine, redrew the inflammatory cytokines, those markers normaled, and he proved treatment, not cure. They felt dramatically better and symptoms regressed and inflammatory cytokines normalized on clean building, well-called cholestyramine. Then he took them off the cholestyramine well-call, redrew those inflammatory cytokines, and they stayed low, and that proved cure, ... until your next major exposure. Then he put them back into the water damaged, moldy apartment building, and C4A spiked within 24 hours. TGF beta and MMP9 went up about hours 48 to 72. And he said, this building is making the patient sick. And for people who just do random crap, it is so disrespectful to the amount of work that Dr. Shoemaker put into that, Deb Wadner, his assistant, put into that, his family sacrifice so he could be up, another night writing these papers. And most importantly, the chronically ill patient that went along for that journey to prove that data. So the patient that walks through my door doesn't have to, right? And you need to honor someone who does sincere science like that, all in the name of the patient. Dr. Shoemaker doesn't have a patent on well call. He doesn't have a patent on cholestyramine, right? There's no money grab. There is a physician oath he took, the Hippocratic oath for the medical doctor, that he is 100% abiding to protect the patient. His statements are, if you can't get it done in 24 hours, I guess you're staying up. Never go to bed with a sick patient. Those are Dr. Shoemaker. So that's fun to have him as a mentor, right? You're always disappointing the general, right? You're like, oh, I can't keep up. How does the man do it? But he has such a relentless passion for solving and resolving the chronically ill, so that they can get back to doing whatever it is they love and have health, wealth, liberty, happiness, and intact families, intact relationships, intact brains. It would be wonderful if we could bankrupt memory care, right? It would be so nice if we just said that was the last person that's ever going to atrophy. And CIRS is a huge part of that. It's not everything, but it's a huge part of our healthcare crisis.
Well, we want to let everybody know that's listening, this is just part 1, because we've had many conversations on the phone and we plan on having 2 more interviews. So this is part 1 of a 3-part series. So you're going to want to come back and hear what we have in store in the next 2 interviews.
I just want to say thank you for having me on, but also thank you for on those hard days. I think about you guys and I think they're working their tails off. I can keep working my tails off, and we just need to keep building armies of patients, mitigators, remediators, lawyers, doctors, nurses, acupuncture, everyone. We need about 10,000 strong to take down this illness. We know the solution. We know the diagnostic steps. We just need the team of bandits to finish the job. So I just love the promotion and awareness and support and access that you guys provide.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go real quick, then Olivia, you can finish us, okay? I just wanted to say thank you, because it is rare to find people that we feel like we can connect with and that are genuinely in this for the right reason. And the fact that you even believe in our organization enough to sponsor our booth. I mean, you talked about us coming to CIRS, but that's really because of you and everyone at CIRS believing what we're doing at Malachi's Message and with the CIRS Support Fund. So for everybody listening, they are the ones that have sponsored our booth. They became a corporate sponsor through that. And they said, we want to partner with what you're doing because we believe in it. And you haven't heard the hours and hours of behind conversations, but Eric and his team truly are in this for the right reason. And they really do believe in what we're doing at Malachi's Message, because they believe in helping people in a holistic way. And it's incredible. Been very refreshed. Olivia and I have talked a lot about it and how we were just blown away, because our interactions came in a time where we were being bombarded by negative, and people coming against us. And you stepped in with your team at just the right moment, quite literally. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I want to tell Olivia, and then you finish off, Olivia, but I'm expecting you to write a new song called Cupid. And it is meant to attract a financial, benevolent multimillionaire who's going to put $1 million into Malachi's Message Fund, because the applications these poor women get on a daily basis is so freaking intense. And these are two of the most real people I get to hang out with. And then they just feel kind of a depression because the need is here and the bank account is here. We need to get the funding. They send a copy of Surviving and Thriving Mold to everyone that they support and fund. They make sure they vet the doctors are doing the proper labs. It's extraordinary. So if you have $10 or $100,000 and you need a 501c at the end of the year that's doing real stuff to change and solve and resolve chronically ill. If you're a Republican, you love that libertarian vibe. If you love that social safety net and you're a Democrat, like these two are rocking it with a message that is so pure, so clean, but they're underfunded. And it's not an issue of access. What we're providing is access to academia, to better providers, to better mitigators, inspectors, so that when you spend those dollars, they get spent wisely to solve and resolve chronic illness. But I want to just say, Olivia, I expect that you're going to bring your most financially seductive chords and make it rain for the chronically ill.
Well, I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, I feel so blessed to be able to just be talking to you both and being able to just be in the same space. And I'm so inspired by both of you. Elizabeth is a rock star in the app. Like you were talking about applications, like you are absolute rock star. We were just talking that beforehand. And Eric, it's so good to just like, literally it was the perfect time. Like Elizabeth just said, it was, we were feeling very bombarded by everything. And I'm like, man, do we bite off more than we could chew here? Like, this is wild. But, you know, I feel like it wasn't an accident that God brought me and Elizabeth together when he did, and then now brought all of us together when he did. And I'm just honored to be a part of it. And just thank you so much for your time, and your heart just shows so much. Like, I'm not kidding you. I mean, it's just, it really shines through you. And I'm really grateful to be here with you guys.
Aw, I feel like we need a group hug.
Go team. I can't wait for round two.
Great.
Everyone who's dealing with chronic illness, if it's CIRS or not, hang in there. We're working on it. We're feverishly trying to get to everybody and everything. These are treatable illnesses. And we're trying to spruce up the healthcare community so that they are ready for you.